Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to the United States never should have been a superpower. I reacted to this channel once about a week ago, I think, around that sort of time, and I mean, I don't really know what to take from this title, because obviously on YouTube you'll get titles that say certain things and then you'll go into the video and it just explains it and then you understand. But with this one, the United States should have never been a superpower. I mean, I don't really get what it's coming at, but maybe the context behind it is so much more than the title or whatever. But we're going to check this out, hopefully going to enjoy, and yeah, time to do some learning, I guess. Let's jump into this. Links also in the description to my Patreon, where you can see reactions I can't post to YouTube, TV series, movie reactions, all that good stuff. Links are there for those interested, and let's just check this out.
Will the United States survive another 100 years? In an age of superpower fatigue, mass polarization, social degradation, and declining faith in the political systems which hold the country together, many believe that the United States is on course for collapse within many of our lifetimes. The US is in fact being crushed by the weight of responsibility thrust upon it in the aftermath of the Great Wars, which gradually transferred the role of Western hegemon from the Empire of Britain to that of the United States. This is compounded by the natural cycles of nations and those cycles unique to America, particularly democratization, territorial expansion, and the power balance created by the two-party system.
Oh, I did react to this channel, but it was a bit, I think it was a few weeks ago, not just a week ago. I think it may be like a month ago now.
The United States, had it been a fully developed state, perhaps with an overseas empire like those of Europe, say Britain, France, Germany, etc., could have adopted the role of a global superpower and not face the same issues it faces today. The United States, had it never become a global superpower and simply remained a developing regional power like China or Iran, could have continued along and once again not face the same issues it faces today. Hello audience, Mr. Z here with another video for you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We have videos like this every week, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who's donated to us on Patreon, Utreon, and right here on YouTube through channel memberships. Your donations really go a long way to keeping this channel going, and by donating to us across any of these platforms, you'll get access to some great perks including physical merch, a custom designed flag wallpaper, and access to an exclusive members-only Discord server where you can enter your scenarios for a chance to have them made into full videos. You can follow the pop-up on screen here, or go to the comment section or description to visit any of these pages and support our channel, and of course you can do so by clicking the join button right below this video. If you can't donate anything, consider subscribing and sharing this video to help the channel out. Now, back to the video. What sets the global level policies of Britain and America apart, and for that matter the hypothetical global level policies of France or Germany, is that for those countries there was always a clear separation between how things were governed at home and how things were governed abroad. Britain, by the time it became a world empire, had a nation, an English nation, and an English and later British state. Everything outside of that was merely an extension of the empire and would receive separate priority, with the ideal that the empire's purpose was ultimately to benefit the motherland.
Okay.
The United States contains...
See, it was very selfish. It was a very, very selfish view, wasn't it? Which led to a lot of horrible things happening. And I guess it's going to sort of go into how it wasn't necessarily... how it's not necessarily how it's been with the US. Obviously, there's still negative things, but in a different sense, maybe. And all that sort of stuff. I guess maybe we'll be going into like stuff like NATO as well, possibly.
There's multiple nations, multiple peoples, and these people from various backgrounds, beliefs, and lifestyles often clashed, such as in the case of the American Civil War. Now, the same could be said of Britain, which is composed of Scottish, Welsh, Irish, and English nations, but by the time of Britain's empire and following several violent struggles including their own civil war, it was clear that the English were the dominant kingdom of their union. Like Britain and England, the United States in the aftermath of the American Civil War had established that the populations of the North were, for the sake of analogy, the dominant kingdom of their union, seeing the South remain a defined political force for decades despite reintegration. The North, however, was not perfectly homogeneous. It was a mix of Anglos, Germans, Irish, and newly arriving third wavers, and these populations largely practiced Methodism, Lutheranism, Catholicism, and Episcopalianism, still a far cry from a single nation, but an American ethnogenesis was occurring, and this was especially apparent in the 1900s, when aggressive positions were taken by Northern Anglo-Americans to assimilate the Germans, Irish, and third wavers into a single American identity. This was a crucial point in American history, when the United States needed to answer the important question of what is an American. The country was truly still discovering itself, but before it had a chance to, it was thrust into the global scene with World War I. Americans of this background calling to support one side of the war, Americans of that background calling to support the other side. In the aftermath of the conflict, the United States hunkered down, returned to an internal focus under the administrations of Harding and Coolidge, heavily restricted immigration, and again tried to define the American identity. but it wouldn't be long before crisis hit with the Great Depression and soon after World War II. The United States emerging from the conflict as a global superpower and yet without a consolidated national identity, seeing it fracture more and more decade by decade. Now, Russia, China, and India are all countries which, like the United States, are massive land empires that house several different people groups. But when someone says Russian, the image that comes to mind probably isn't a Turkmen or a Tatar. It's Ivan from Moscow in his Ushanka
That's a good point, to be fair.
hat and tracksuit. When someone says Chinese, the first thing that comes to mind probably isn't a Tibetan or a Manchu, it's a Han Chinese person. When someone says American, what does that mean? Maybe it's a Southerner, and they would certainly agree that they're the real Americans. Maybe it's a New Englander. They'd probably argue they're more American than the Southerners because they never tried to secede. Maybe it's...
The thing is, I never used to realize how diverse the US was. So if you asked me this like 5 years ago or something, I mean, I don't know what I would have said, but it would have been a lot different to what I'd say now. Because now you couldn't really say, to be honest. There's probably like 3 or 4 like 3 or 4 different types of Americans that some people will think of and then different people will think of, you know, like he's mentioning now. Like that would just spring to mind when you get asked the question.
It's a German American. After all, they're the largest ethnic group in the country. Or maybe it's the Hispanic Americans who would argue that the land belonged to their native ancestors long before the Europeans arrived. The point is that America never consolidated a national identity, and without a national identity, it was wholly unprepared to assume global responsibilities. How could America expect to understand the needs of other countries if it did not understand even itself? And in assuming global responsibility, it neglected domestic needs, allowing national divides to grow further and further. The reason the United States feels so divided and fractured today is because even despite revolutions in communication and transportation, the American identities have lost more and more of their cohesion, all the while populations from all over the world have arrived since then and in unprecedented numbers. Had the United States been given time to define its national identity and matured as a nation, it would have been able to take on the superpower role without facing these stressors. The United States was in the process of sewing together a tapestry, and before it even had a chance to complete it, dropped upon it the weight of the world, and now it's tearing at the seams. Just as Burgundy failed to consolidate a national identity before taking on greater challenges, so too has the United States placed itself in this precarious position. Left alone, the United States was already on course to continue along a path of political democratization and liberalization, but also gradual centralization of federal authority. In a country with a consolidated national identity and a domestic focus, this path would have kept the United States fairly stable. In fact, it would have reinforced the newly emerging identity as the population could more thoroughly pass through policy that favored the majority and would have had the federal power to enforce it. As we discussed in this video here and in the whole 7 Ages of America series, the two-party system has allowed for the emergence of eras in which one party or one ideology dominate national politics, from federalism to Jeffersonianism to Jacksonianism, republicanism, progressivism, and so on. While prior to the Civil War, the dominant ideology had manifested in the form of distinct political parties, by the 1900s this was no longer the case, and both parties came to be dominated by varying factions of near-identical ideologies. Whether Republican or Democratic, progressivism was what ruled until it evolved into the New Deal, with New Dealers in both parties filling Congress, the courts, and the executive office until this ideology was succeeded by neoconservatism and neoliberalism. And as the ideology evolved, it placed greater and greater emphasis upon foreign policy at the expense of domestic policy, and fueled increased dissatisfaction with the political system from the average citizen, who now feels that neither party actually fixes the country's problems, and naturally this leads to a questioning of the system itself. Progressivism lost favor with the public because of the First Great War. The New Dealers in great part but not exclusively lost favor with the public because of the Vietnam War. And now neoliberalism and neoconservatism are losing favor because of incessant policing missions across the globe for the sake of protecting democracy while conditions back home grow worse by the day. The reason the political system feels so broken, why so many Americans feel that their votes don't matter, is because the system has ceased prioritizing the well-being of the American citizens. Only having 2 political parties with overlapping ideologies would not bother the American public as much as it does today if those 2 options actually took real action to improve the quality of life for Americans instead of being options to invade this country over that country.
The thing is, Western countries typically help the people of its country before, again, going for other like helping other countries. I don't know if that's necessarily 100% the case now, because I mean, with Ukraine, a lot of funds from Western countries has been going to Ukraine before benefiting its own people, but I feel like it's a lot more extreme with the US, as opposed to countries like Russia, China, powerful countries, but they seem to spend all their money on trying to fight or like to benefit themselves in different ways that don't help the people of the country. And that's kind of how the US, I guess, sort of is, because it's a Western country, but it's with the Western, I don't know, beliefs and stuff. But then it's not as extreme, I don't think, as Russia, because it's just so much more money. So there's more money that can go towards helping people of the country, but so much of it goes towards fighting these wars. It's sort of like Russia and China in a sense of like power before the people or something, or helping other countries before its people. Obviously, China and Russia don't do that in the same way, but not basically just giving a lot of their riches to the people to help benefit the society and the people in general, as opposed to a lot of the Western countries that can spend more on their people because of the help and the aid from, I guess, the US in that case. Which is quite a brutal comparison, but I know Russia and China, like, they'll spend their money, like, they'll have so much money, but like Russia especially, it will spend all its money on its military. And I'm like, if you just gave a bit of that to the people and then just like focus on the people, and you obviously, I know countries have to care about power to agree, but you just made the people happy, gave the people better lives, I'm sure you would just be such a better country in general. Like, there'd be so much more benefits to everyone living there, and they'd probably be more patriotic and more wanting to help the country anyway. So it's just a bit weird to me, but I don't know. I see definitely where this is going. I completely understand.
Just as Austria's empire grew weak and incapable of either satisfying or dominating its constituent populations, so too is the United States exhausting itself abroad and allowing discontent to bubble within its own borders. What this amounts to is that, yes, the United States is risking collapse every year that it fails to put foreign matters in the periphery and focus on the rising issues at home. But at the same time, there is so much occurring in the world that the United States is fearful of what will happen if it does not involve itself in global affairs. Britain had been wise enough to prop the United States up as a successor so that when the Second Great War was over, there was a force capable of challenging the Soviet Union.
Okay. Well, so before, was it Britain that was fighting against the Soviet Union at that point? I mean, the Soviet Union was pretty new at that point, so I don't know. But was it like between Britain and Russia before, or Britain and Soviet Union before? Was that how it was? And then obviously World War II happened, and then it just sort of, the focus changed for a bit, but... Wait, before World War II, was there a rivalry between the US and the Soviet, or the USSR, the Soviet Union? I don't know if there was. It sort of came after, didn't it? Because they sort of fought together in a sense of fighting against Nazi Germany. So before that, maybe it was Britain at that point, the only real country that could help try and fight against it, but they obviously didn't have anywhere near the amount of power that we needed to try and fight against them.
However, the US has not done such a thing itself. The US has certainly propped up regional powers like Israel as checks in certain parts of the world, but countries like Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea are no match for aspiring superpowers like China. The European Union has become too comfortable under the American shield provided by NATO that they have not developed the domestic military might to counter Russia, and the English-speaking countries have grown so accustomed to American leadership and European cooperation that Britain, at least for a time, has seemingly ceased developing any ambitious goals of its own. The United States appears to have entered the global game without an exit strategy and is now burning the candle at both ends, trying to maintain its democratic world order and stability at home. But the simple fact is that without stability at home, there will be no United States to maintain any order anywhere. There is still hope for the US to turn things around. There can be a revival of the American standard of living. There can once again be a political system where politicians across both parties compete to provide the people a better future. We can see the consolidation of a new united American identity alongside the fostering of the regional identities of this land. But this will come at the cost of global preeminence, something which appears inevitable either way, and will require intelligent decision-making from both politicians and from the public. If circumstances do not change, it is very possible the United States will gradually fall into economic crisis, experience a collapse of military investment and military might, see increasing unrest from various political and regional groups within its borders, and cease to exist in its current form.
See, the thing is, I always see the US as a country that just can't fail because of all the cultural importance and all that sort of stuff, but I guess it can. All the empires have failed before, and I don't think it'll be anytime soon, to be honest, because again, I think in the current world that we're in, where the power is now seen a different way, you've got it in culture, you've got it in different ways, it would just be a lot harder for it to fall, the US to fall, but I guess you don't know. Maybe they need to change how much they're helping the other world and focus more on themselves. That's pretty much what I've taken from this, which I completely can completely see that and understand. This is why I'm so curious about an alternate history where America returned to some form of isolationism in the 90s and whether that might have left us in a better place today. It's possible, man. It's definitely possible. America was never meant to be one nation. Most of the founding fathers and original states would not have agreed to the Constitution if... So what does it mean? By this, does he mean that they wanted to have control of the world? Is that sort of what it's saying? I feel like that's what it's saying, which I didn't know that, to be fair, but that's a little look into this. Let me know your thoughts. I know this is a bit of a touchy subject. People, obviously, people's lives that we're talking about. People get a bit frustrated or this and that about it, but let me know your thoughts. Let me know what your opinions are. And that's that. And if you want more reactions to this channel, I can do that. But yeah, until next time. Peace.